Speaking of that, Sean Spicer with us now. He is a senior advisor to America First Policies and America First Policies Action, the one and only political action committee sanctioned and endorsed by the President of the United States. Not the others, just that. And so he is with us now, senior advisor. He was also, of course, the press secretary to the president when they actually had press briefings. I don't know, the last one I was at was months ago. I can't remember the last actual press briefing they had in the briefing room with the press secretary, but Sean had him every day, and it was a highlight of my day back then and when. And he's also the author of the New York Times best-selling The Briefing. You want to buy that? Easiest thing to do, go to my website, johnfredericksradio.com. Right there, there's an ad for it. Click on it. You can go to your favorite bookstore or you can go to Amazon, and you'll have it in 2 days. The Briefing, Sean Spicer, and he's with us now. Sean, great to have you, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, John. Good to see you.
So, Sean, let's get to more Mueller coming 10 hours of testimony today. I think it's going to be very anticlimactic. What are the Democrats going to say today after it's all over? Then what do they do?
Well, I mean, look, I think I keep saying this is the audio version of the Mueller report. This is just them wanting to get clips, audio clips and video clips of Mueller saying what he said in the report so they can make ads and try to, have their viral moment that each member will want to seek out. This is nothing more than that. So I think we've seen from Robert Mueller that he's going to stay within the contours, but I think Democrats are going to try to get him to say yes or no to a variety of questions and then have that aha moment and say, well, the president said the following, and here's Mueller directly contradicting that or what have you. I think that this is largely settled matter, and they're trying to figure out, how to sort of resuscitate the dead body, if you will. They just keep trying to figure out how to pump life into something that's been settled because they didn't like the outcome and the way it was presented the first, 4 times.
Look, I really don't know what they do after this because I think you're right. This is basically the movie version of the 450-page book or whatever you want to say, the report, and they're going to highlight certain things, and the Republicans are going to ask questions. Nothing's going to come of it, but I'm just wondering what the Democrats say on Friday. They've been doing this collusion mantra here and obstruction of justice for 24 months. Look, Sean, they just had an impeachment vote a week ago where 95 or something Democrats and a handful of Republicans voted for to go forward with impeachment proceedings. I just don't know what they're going to talk about once this is over, and I'd love to be in a CNN meeting and figure out what the hell they're going to do Thursday.
Well, look, I mean, I don't think that, as I said, I think this is a pretty simple exercise in my mind, which I think sounds crazy, but I think this is it, which is they have resigned themselves to just saying, okay, well, whatever he says, let's analyze that ad nauseum. It simply is trying to add life to something that has passed its time. And so they are going to analyze every clip, talk about his body motions, what hair was out of place, what color tie did he wear, and what did that mean? Was that actually a subtle attempt to convey some? They are going to use whatever is said or not said. Honestly, John, I think you're going to have as much talk about what he doesn't say as what he does. They're going to talk about what the guy sitting next to him did or did not do, what facial expressions. But the folks on the left, and I would include most of the media in that category, are going to just look at everything that they can in what is said and done today as an attempt to continue the discussion of the settled matter.
Well, I think you're right there. We'll have to see how it plays out. Sean Spicer with us, Senior Advisor, America First Policies, former Press Secretary, President Trump. Hey, Sean, just let me ask you a sidebar. When you were there and when Sarah first went there, we had a press briefing when you were there every day. When Sarah was there, it went to 3 times a week, then twice a week, then once a week, to once a quarter. Now they're disbanded. What is up with that?
Well, I think simply put, if you look at how much the president engages with the press, I've said this all along, John, that the job of the press secretary is to speak, or any press secretary, frankly, is to always speak in lieu of the principal being able to do it themselves. I think when you see the frequency at which President Trump is actually engaging with the press secretary's view, clearly, in Sarah's case, and I think so far with Stephanie, and we'll see where it goes, is that the president is the best person to explain his policies and thinking on whatever issue, rather than leave it to a press secretary to come out and say, here's what I think he says, and then you're going to see him 10 minutes later and you can ask him yourself. So there's, my guess is that's the current thinking.
All right, that makes sense. Sean, let's get to a couple other issues here. I want to get to the president's budget that he negotiated with Pelosi and Schumer. It's going to raise the debt by another $400 billion. A lot of conservatives upset by it, said he should veto it, shouldn't make the deal. My position's the opposite. I applaud the deal. I want him to sign it. I want to go forward. We have a $21 trillion debt right now. To me, $400 billion, it just doesn't matter. But the flip side of this, Sean, is the Democrats utilize now, they weaponize shutting the government down. Every time we do it, every time it happens, Republicans get annihilated. And if it happens again in the end of October in 2019, the Democrats are going to take in Virginia the House, they're going to take the Senate, and they're going to control it for a generation. I just don't want that to happen. These government shutdowns are a disaster for Republicans. They never work. And that's where the thing ends up. What say you?
I largely agree with that. I mean, we have won one shutdown, and that was the one that the president branded the Schumer shutdown. And here's why I think partially it worked, and this just goes to your point. Republicans get caught in the trap of waiting to the end every time, and Democrats then make it about, puppies that are left to hang out on some, abandoned lot. And I mean, it's always some sympathetic attempt to message how bad this is. Republicans wait until the very end and they get caught in the trap. I think the president, the one time that we've messaged effectively, this got out in front. I think the problem is that we played the same game over again. We make the same moves on the chessboard and then we wonder why we get screwed. What I think Republicans need to do is get ahead of this, meaning that, to your point, I'm not resigned on allowing the debt and the deficit to continue. I think this is a travesty that we're allowing this to occur. Because at someday the chickens are going to come home to roost. So that being said, I think that Republicans, where I fault congressional Republicans, both in the majority and in the minority, is that we have not laid out a concrete, constructive proposal to effectively reform and cut government. Right? I think that there is so much, not just waste, but inefficiencies in government because there are programs that were started literally decades ago. They either have outlived their purpose or are so under-modernized that they can't effectively do it, which means that the taxpayers are A, having their money wasted, and then B, not getting the programs and the services that they deserve because the reforms and modernization of their practices are so out of whack that they're wasting money. And so I look at this as a Republican and say, if I were leading the conference, I'd say let's start to actually put together, X number of proposals that will reform, cut, achieve efficiencies, et cetera, through government, and be willing to present those every time and make the Democrats walk the plank and say, you, by not agreeing to this, are, allowing literally trillions to be wasted or millions or billions, whatever, to be wasted and allowing and beyond just the fiscal piece of this, but giving the American people the most inefficient product for their money, right? So if you're trying to receive a veteran's benefit or a housing loan or whatever, right now the lack of looking at how to do that better, how to do it more efficiently and more effectively, is not only wasting taxpayer money, but it's not giving them the service that they need in the best way. And so I think that Republicans for too long have waited until the clock's got a few seconds left and then go to Democrats who put them over a barrel. We need to get ahead of the game right now.
Sean, so I agree with that, and there's never been a comprehensive proposal that says here's what we're going to do in order to cut spending. I mean, under this agreement, every single agency's budget goes up, which is the exact opposite of what a lot of people want. But my point is, I just want to get through the election.
But you know what, John, hold on. You said this earlier, and I'm trying to think of it was right before I went on air, and I think this is it too, which is that Republicans are willing to give up the fight before they're willing even to get into battle, right? And I think that the problem is that too often they don't even want to have the fight. And there are some agencies, when you look at them and actually have the time to explain them, and say if you did it in a bite-sized piece over a year, as opposed to waiting till the very end, and say, listen to this agency that was stood up, in 1942. And it was supposed to do the following, and the following doesn't even exist anymore.
Right.
We would win that battle. but we wait until the very end and then we cower. I think that we need to start taking the fight to the Democrats and say, you Democrats, defend this program, defend this inefficiency, defend this waste of taxpayers' money, because you're making some man or woman go out today and make money that the federal government is going to take a portion of to support this waste. We don't do that.
Well, when do you see that coming? Second term?
Well, I mean second term, but I also think it takes. Look, I remember I was the communications director for the budget committee back in from 2000 to 2003. We went after waste and fraud like it was a champ. It takes a leadership and it takes desire to do this. Because the funny thing is, you really, as an elected official, you don't really get rewarded for saving money. No one ever comes on. It's always, if you think about the political construct, people come home and say, I got you this clinic, I got you this road.
Right.
It's always about spending. No one ever comes home and says, I saved you $8.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, if you save $2 million right now in the federal budget, that's literally, I mean, I'm not even sure that that's a penny. So I think that it's hard to quantify savings, and politicians don't generally feel as though that they get the reward for doing that.
Right.
And so, but it takes a leader, somebody who gets in there and says, I'm not doing this because I'm going to get, applauses at my next town hall, but I'm going to do it because it's the right thing for this country.
Yeah, and I think if you're right, I mean, if Republicans did that, I like it bite-sized, make it specific, agencies, cut it out, and then, put the proposal on the floor. I think you can have an opportunity to be successful. They're simply not going to do it the way it's done now. And look, Rob Whitman has been screaming about this since I've been on the air. For a decade, Whitman has been saying the same thing. I just got a text here from Scott Taylor that's running for U.S. Senate 2020 in Virginia, Republican. He says, both you guys are right. Take the issue away from them. Sean was just spot on. Let's do a comprehensive proposal proactively of cutting spending rather than just talk about cutting spending. And he says, John, you're spot on as well with the strategy. What POTUS just did, a shutdown would crush Republicans in the General Assembly. And I was saying in my show earlier that I've got a lot of texts from people that are upset. They said, this president should veto what he's already negotiated. I think that's wrong-headed. At this point now, I just want to get this off the table. We got bigger fish to fry. We can get to that later. Even the president said that. Look, I'm going to get to this in 2021. Right now, a shutdown annihilates Republicans in 2019 in Virginia. And you give this House to the Democrats, Sean, and you live here in Virginia, they'll control it for a generation. You'll never get it back. So I think the stakes are just too high to screw with it.
Look, I think the funny thing is you're absolutely right. People don't fully appreciate the impact that the House of Delegates is going to have right now. If Republicans have a razor-thin majority, and so even if you live down somewhere, Southwest Virginia and Tidewater, where you have a Republican delegate, if you don't help the rest of the Commonwealth maintain a majority, we're all going to pay the price for it. And so, and I think that to me is a very scary proposition. I live in Northern Virginia, and honest to God, if it wasn't for a Republican majority in the House of Delegates, we would be taxed to death up there. And I think we're pretty close to it already. But it's because of the Dillon rule that prevents a lot of the municipalities from doing stuff because Richmond sort of holds back. But once they get the green light from Richmond to go ahead,
it's over.
It's going to be crushing up there. And so to all of your listeners throughout the Commonwealth, I think understanding that if you live in a safe district where your delegate, and frankly, I'll be honest, I don't think we saw in the last election, safe is a relative word now. But make sure that your delegate is taken care of, that they're on good standing, that they got their race under control.
They get on the ballot.
And only then, try to figure out who else you can help, because we need to make sure that everyone gets pulled over the finish line. And then I would just say one last thing that Scott mentioned in the text is we need to be, and I've got to look more at what Rob Whitman's doing because it sounds exactly right. But we've got to be a lot more like start putting this stuff out there, posting it. Here are 30 things that we should be getting rid of, and stop worrying about how much they cost. Meaning that there's so many times when I talk to a member of Congress, they'll say, "Oh, well, that's only $10,000 or $100,000." It's like, okay, I get it. But at some point, you add all that up, it starts adding up. And it's also just a way of life, right? If you start saying, oh, I'm going to let $10 get thrown away or $20 get thrown away or 10 cents, if you become that kind of person, then you are going to waste money because you're wasting every aspect. But if you are thrifty, if you are good steward of your own money, and in this case, taxpayers' money, then you're not going to let that 50,000, that 100,000, and it's a mentality and a philosophy that we need to start employing all throughout government, whether it's in Richmond or Washington. People have got to remember that actual people go out and work for this money, that then the government, whether it's at the state level or at the federal level, are taking from our paychecks. And if it's being used for good reasons to make sure that we help our fellow man or woman, or we provide for the common good, whether it's law enforcement or roads and bridges, that's great. But let's make sure that we do it in the right way. And I think that if we don't start as Republicans putting it out there and saying, I'm willing to fight to make sure that you didn't have to go to work today to waste money, then I think that we actually can stand on a higher ground. But we wait too long, and people have no idea what we're talking about. So let's get it out there. Or every time we see one of these projects, put it up on a website, and maybe we start working all together as we see these, inefficiencies. And sometimes it's not just waste; it's inefficiencies. We're running a program that hasn't been modernized, or we're running off a Commodore 64 computer instead of a new Dell or Mac.
Well, look, Republicans in the House, as you know, have not been very good stewards of appropriate messaging. So let's see if they do that and take your advice. One more issue. Let's get to Virginia. I've got Scott Taylor coming up in a few moments here. But right now, the Trump 2020 campaign looking at Virginia as a battleground state, Sean. The new Trump 2020 state director, really nice young fella, had a chance to spend some time with him. Justin Rice, up-and-comer. I like him a lot. He's got a staff here that he's going to eventually get to 29 people. At the height of the campaign last time in Virginia, Sean, and you know this, at the height of the campaign in Virginia, we were a battleground state, and I was the chairman. I think we had 6 paid staff here, 5 or 6. That was it in the entire state. Now he's going to have 29. And again, I would think that if we do well in the legislative races in 2019, the president's campaign is probably going to keep this as a battleground state. If we get annihilated, I doubt we're going to get those resources. Am I right?
Absolutely. And I think that's the nut of this. We need to show there needs to be a path to victory. And I think there is one. There's no question about it in Virginia. We've come close. We saw that with Gillespie's run both for governor and against Mark Warner last time. The votes are there. Ken Cuccinelli did very, very well when he ran for governor in terms of what people thought. If we get out there and vote, Virginia is a battleground state, but this goes back to fighting. If we give up the fight before it even comes to us, then the polls are going to reflect that it's not viable. But I know that the numbers are there. I believe that change is desired, but we need to have a strong showing this November to make sure that everybody around the country says, and I know that Scott and others are jumping in the Senate race. I mean, we can win that back. There's no question in my mind. I think that it just takes everybody out there saying, I'm willing to do my part to return this U.S. Senate seat to a Republican. It's literally a question of whether or not people want to get off the sidelines and say it means something to me. And I can tell you that I've seen it in the last couple of cycles. There is a fight there, and the numbers are there. But we got to be willing to do. Everybody's got to be able to lift their hand and say, I'm going to go out there and knock on a door, talk to a friend, persuade somebody, because we've seen what President Trump's been able to do with the Republican Senate in terms of the judges alone. And that majority in the Senate, while we have a Republican majority, is razor thin. And so putting Virginia back in the column is a huge, huge help to the president's ability to pursue his policies and the reform of the judiciary.
It can be done. And if you want to volunteer for the Virginia Trump 2020 campaign, we'll get you hooked up. Just text me your name, your city, and your email. Your name, your city, your email to 757-692-1710, 757-692-1710. National Training Week for the Trump campaign going on right now. We'll get you hooked up, 757-692-1710. Send me a text. Sean Spicer, America First Policy's only sanctioned political action committee for the president, senior advisor. Thanks for being with us. Read his book, The Briefing, New York Times bestseller. Go to Amazon or your favorite bookstore. And Scott Taylor running for U.S. Senate. We've already endorsed him because guess what? Taylor can win. John Fredericks Radio Network.